Hello, everybody. Here we are, second sandbox session coming to you live with Dr. Matthew Norton. Matthew and I met not too long ago, and I was really intrigued because not only was he incredibly present and thoughtful and intelligent, you just had this way of connecting. And again, I imagine it's because of everything you've learned about emotional agility. And for our listeners, I have a feeling they probably don't know that term. And I would say it's probably the closest thing to emotional, like EQ, but yet I'm sure it also differs. In which way would you say that emotional agility is similar or dissimilar to what people understand about EQ?
I think that it's not so dissimilar. Um, I think emotional quotient, like the word quotient, I was never a big fan of that. Like, okay, what we got mathematical on this or what? But in emotional intelligence often seem like I could know a lot. And this is one thing I find to be true. People know a lot about us, a lot of stuff in life that they're including myself that don't necessarily always play it out in real time, right? So the ability to be emotionally agile, that's a more meaningful way of framing it for me because I work with a lot of really smart people who understand conceptually what all that is. I just don't know how to do it in the moment when life is calling for me to bring those skills.
So, Dr. Matthews, because you are actually a doctor of chiropractic,
Hmm.
and yet at the same exact time, you have this site, People Plus Purpose.
Correct? Yeah.
And I visited that and I've taken the assessments, and you have four actual assessments on there. And yet it doesn't seem like that has anything to do with your aptitude as a chiropractor. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a good question. And people will say to me sometimes, like, "Oh, I heard you." There's a couple of things that come up. People say, "I heard you retired," and then I think, well, first thought is they don't really know me if they said that, because if they knew me well enough, they would know that's probably never going to happen until I depart the planet. Um, but then when they hear about what I'm doing now, or what actually overlapped by about an 8 year time frame of my last years of practice, and already had be beginning the foundation for People Plus Purpose, which then became two full-time gigs, two full-time businesses. That was just, I mean, it was not sustainable 7 days a week, right? So, and I had wanted to move. I live in San Diego, California, where my amazing son and daughter-in-law live. And so he said, "Mom, Dad, come here." And so I wanted to move from Central California, where we were, but I was also ready for a change. So people will then be a little bit surprised. So now tell me again, what's the segue connection between being a doctor of chiropractic and what you're doing now? And the answer for me comes back to the word freedom, because why were people coming to see me as a doctor of chiropractic? They were coming because they wanted to be free from some pain or something physical that was limiting them. I never really saw the people, at least after I got into it for a few years, I'll say, as back pain people, neck pain people, those things that people think, oh, maybe a chiropractor could help me with this. Um, I saw them as people who had a life and a purpose and dreams and goals, and these physical challenges were getting in the way. They were not free to live fully. And so I began also over those years to realize that there were many factors. These were not just physical injuries, but they had mental, emotional, other elements that were sometimes primary to their problem, that they may have been manifesting in this particular part of their body, and I could adjust them and I could make change. But a lot of times the chronicity of issues that I was dealing with was because there were ongoing mental, emotional factors that were going on. So I'd have people like sometimes say to me, call me pastor. And then they say, oh, sorry. And I say, no, no, that's a compliment. And I thought, because what does that mean? It means that there's at some level you're knowing that I'm caring about you, caring for you on another level than just treat my pain. And so I always saw that as a compliment. So the work I'm doing now, have been increasingly doing, is to help set people free from whatever blockages there are mentally, emotionally, less so physically. Because I really kind of realized I didn't love the physical part as much as I loved the mental, emotional part, in all honesty. I cared, but I didn't care as much as like, what's going on behind that? Um, and so when I can explore, and the use of assessments is a key piece in the lens by which I can get a feel for these different dimensions of people, then talk through where their challenges are, where are their blockages, what's not happening, where are the stresses in the people in their lives that they're dealing with, where is the wisdom to guide a breakthrough and that will set them free to live the life that they were more destined, designed to live, and to where they can have joy and be able to thrive. And that's just not enough people. So that's what I've dedicated my life to, really. That was a long answer, I know, but
It was a great answer. And I think part of that is just acknowledging the astuteness you had to recognize um, I'm trained to treat the body, but yet we're connected beings. And if there's issues, like you said, blockages kind of in more of the emotional dimension, we're interconnected. Like
yeah,
it's not like it's not going to show up in the body.
right.
Now, I don't know at what point that book, The Body Keeps the Score, was published. Is that a book that you're familiar with?
I'm not.
Okay, so the basic premise is it's widely popularized, like the book is kind of everywhere now. And it's the idea that people are finally, it's more mainstream, where it's
Yeah,
like there's something going on in your body
right,
and it is coming from some emotional
right.
trauma.
Yeah,
It's keeping score of what was going on the inside. If you got
yeah,
hurt, if you got wounded, whatever that is,
right.
it manifests some way.
Yeah, yeah,
So then all of a sudden it's like we're not just managing symptoms.
right.
We're actually trying to unlock root causes so that we can get, the real fix. Now, I think to know Matthew wouldn't be possible if someone didn't necessarily understand the genesis of this. I don't know if you want to get into that right now, or were you kind of eager to respond to the Body Keeps the Score book?
Um, well, I do have a response, so thanks for bringing it back to that before we go elsewhere. I don't know that book, but I was very inspired by a book called When the Body Says No. The subtitle was The Cost of Hidden Stress, written by Gabor Mate, which I heartily recommend. That I read, I don't know, back in the day, back in probably 2005, something like that. I loved it. It looked, I mean, and he's a medical doctor who was very interested from up in British Columbia, was very interested in these hidden nuances that were manifesting ultimately in terms of uh, whether it was immune or autoimmune conditions, and where a lot of times there was not the freedom to express these things that were going on, and the body said no, probably similar to what the book you were referencing. I loved it so much that when I wrote my book, and this is not a plug because it's not even something that's easily available, but when I wrote this book, Where Does It Hurt? And that was a play off of, you know, multi-dimensionally, where does it really hurt, right? But the subtitle was Surprising Stories and Insights for Releasing Pain, not relieving it on purpose, and Restoring Whole Body Health. Well, that, trying to get the message out, so it became a kind of a business card for me in all the last probably 8 years of my practice. Um, but the reason I mentioned that is Gabor Mate. I loved his book so much. I kind of modeled mine after his, and then I reached out to him and asked him if he would read the manuscript. And I didn't know him. I just loved his book. and maybe write me a testimonial for it, which he did. And so I was proud of that. Then got a chance to, when I was up in Vancouver, because I had a daughter who lived there for a while, I reached back out to him and I said, "Hey, I'm going to be up there. Might we, meet for a cup of coffee?" And we did, and it was quite wonderful. So anyway,
I mean, that's incredibly special
yeah,
that someone that is instrumental in your life is this figure that's an inspiration. And then instead of them remaining larger than life, they become human and you actually get to interact with them and spend time with them. Like
yeah,
that really is beautiful.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
It was cool.
so one of my premises is that a lot of the times I talk to people, Matthew, and I help them discover again, like their authentic brilliance, what's unique about them. And whenever we get to the part about, well, you have a unique story, people look at them, kind of start being reflective and they're like, I don't know what's unique about my story.
Yeah,
In a way of like, how does it show up in a way that I can have it aligned to my brand? Because
right,
it's not just every single part of your story. Oh yeah, your mom's this, your dad's this. We're not wanting it in its entirety. This isn't a biography.
right.
And yet, I always tell people often you need to look back on your story, the parts that you'd like to erase, or the parts that you'd never want to relive.
Right,
Because often it's in those moments of pain, it's in
right.
those moments of tragedy that if we don't just completely numb out, we can find that there's some gold there
Yes,
that can be something that can really elevate and transform our lives if we get what we're meant to get when we're there. And I
yes.
use this as a segue into something that happened early on in your life that there's no other way to describe it except for complete tragedy. Can you share what that was?
Yeah. I'll go back just briefly, context wise, to say that the name of my company is called People Plus Purpose. And kind of the reason for that is growing up, I didn't really have a sense of either. And I grew up in a home where my dad left when I was two, and my mom was relatively incapable of managing her own life, let alone having much that to help guide me with any wisdom. And I had one older brother, but he was 8 years older, not around as I got older and as I was growing up and then gone. So it was really kind of me raising myself in so many ways. And so there was that quest for connection, that quest for people, that quest for a message and a meaning in life that nobody really around me did I see that witnessed, evidenced anywhere. So I did manage even from the brokenness, right, to get some clarity on a career direction, was valedictorian in my chiropractic college class, right? I mean, I decided I was going to make something of myself, and that if it was going to happen, it better be me that does it, because nobody's coming to help me, right? Nobody's guiding me. So okay. So I accomplished things up to that point. I got married. In like 2 years into practice, that woman that I married had two daughters that were 2.5 years old when we met, and still three when we got married. Um, and I proceeded over quite a period of time that it took to adopt them. The father abandoned them, and so I made that decision that I would adopt them, and we were 2.5 years or so into marriage, and that adoption was finalized. And then we went off to on a trip to Disneyland. So had the twins were five at this time, and she had just had her birthday and just turned 34 years old, and we were in on the card, which I looked back on later, and we talked about how joyful I was, about how much I celebrated her in my life, and look forward to 50 more years together. Well, that was July, and little did I know that less than a month later, she would have a heart attack on having a beginning tennis lesson, never regained consciousness, and so never said goodbye. She just disappeared from my life. 19-hour kind of Twilight Zone episode of uh, open heart surgery, heart lung machine, all this. And then at 3 in the morning coming in and telling me as I'm waiting in the waiting room that I'm sorry, we tried. And then I had to tell the girls in the next days that their mom was gone, and they were just getting used to me being the dad alongside their birth mother. So all of this was a very, it turned my world completely upside down. And I felt like beginnings of more purpose clarity and people reward in my life that had shown up now suddenly gone or really complicated with the girls. And like, how am I going to do this? I mean, I just was overwhelmed. Like, I don't even know how I'm supposed to do this. And I'm supposed to keep practicing and take care of patients. And um, so I went through all the stages of grieving, of initially denial that this had happened, irrational stuff in those first few nights of like sitting like I was waiting for her to come back. And it's like, oh, that's right. She's not coming back because she's in a box. And it's like, and so to then bargaining, like trying to help God see, the merits of turning this around, right? And I can bring her back, and it's like, what's up? And so, uh, but that didn't change anything, needless to say. And so then the anger that follows from that of like, I'm mad because I didn't, like my dream got squashed, right? I'm mad because I lost this most important person and I don't know how to proceed. So I distinctly remember the day when the girls were gone, and I had a day off, and I think I had many days off at that point because they just said you need to not come in here for a little bit. You're not together enough yet to be caring for anybody, which was wise. Um, and so I had been crying, and I was just kind of pounding on the floor, crying out to God to say, I don't know how to do this. I don't think I can do it. And then all of a sudden, I got this sense that kind of like I opened my hands and that fourth phase of grieving to get to surrender. Because I was trying to understand, and I can't, and you can't understand anything like this. It's like, this makes no rational sense. It's something that happened, right? But I couldn't proceed. I was stuck back to needing a breakthrough, back to freedom that we were talking about. So I just made a commitment in that moment. And I said, God, if you could give me a life that felt like it was worth living again, then I'll dedicate the rest of my life to helping other people find that place to live their best life and help them get the breakthroughs that are needed so that can occur. That one point of decision was the thing that changed my life forever after. It didn't make all things become immediately rosy, for sure. And I had to wrestle through those next weeks and months. But new life opportunity came. My wife that I've been married to now for 36 years appeared in my life. I never looked for a new wife. I used to, when I would share this storyline, I'd say, it's like I got Federal Expressed a new wife, and I wasn't even ready yet. She was there before I was even ready. And then we have an amazing son, and sometimes I'll go fill in his chiropractic office here in San Diego where I live for he and his business partner, and I'll look around and I'll look at all these. They have an amazing, the whole thing is amazing that I've been able to contribute to help develop, right? I coach them. And I think every once in a while I think this never would have happened if my first wife hadn't died. If I hadn't gone through the hardest thing I've ever been through, none of these best things of my life that have occurred since ever would have happened. None of this practice wouldn't be here because my son wouldn't be here. His business partner wouldn't be in San Diego because that was only because they knew my son. And none of these patients would get this. So it just gave me perspective to realize sometimes there has to be a loss. Sometimes we have to surrender and give something up, even if we never understand it. And you were right about what you said earlier, that the greatest power, not only can our redemption, our healing comes from going back and looking at those places that we wished we could have erased. But the ability, the greatest power to help somebody else often flows from those wrestling matches that we had to deal with to be able to get to the other side. It happens a lot for people with all kinds of different stories. A cause that I'm now dedicated to and I'll give my life to because I was a victim of this or that. I struggled with that. So I just want to say, to end that long story, that not only has overall my life been put back together and amazing things have happened, but I am so blessed to have a wife now of 36 years to where, I mean, just last night we were leading a group that we lead, a small group with the church for the church that we go to. And one of the people, I forget exactly what the conversation was, and she said, when I look at the two of you, I just see something so beautiful. And I just kind of took that in. I said, well, thank you. And and I thought that beauty is kind of beauty out of ashes, right?
I just
So that's what drives me. That's why I do what I do. That's why this is not just business consulting. This is not just like this is why it matters. And I think people who know me, get to know me a bit, know that's what's driving it, and then they trust me more because they know this is because that's real for me.
yeah, I was gonna say I just wanted to like sit with you in this moment because it's like it's so beautiful. It's so painful, and yet there's a story of redemption and restoration, and you ending it with that phrase, beauty for ashes. It's like, I mean, I can't not go here, but it's like that's exactly what God has done for me and those closest to me time and time again. It's
Yeah,
like I'm really good at figuring out how to get either covered in ashes or in a place where things are just burned to the ground, it seems like. And God's like, yeah, but if you're willing, if
yeah,
you're open, it's like, Matthew, you could have stayed on the floor.
like, yeah,
You could have stayed down and out.
yeah.
And that story was there. It's true. And that's the crazy thing is that people there's the facts of life that are real,
Mm-hmm,
but then there's an actual truth that can supersede the facts of life. And the facts
mm-hmm.
of life were you went through a horrible tragedy and you had every reason, if you wanted to stay down and out and to have this narrative of bad things happened to me. I'm unfortunate. I lost the greatest thing in my life. And at
And
that point,
people would have accepted that. People would have validated me. They would have said, well, of course, or they would have said about to somebody else, well, of course, look what happened to him, and we don't blame him. But that's not living. And I so value living. And I do feel like, in a sense, I'm honoring my first wife in choosing to live. She didn't get that choice to keep going for, again, only God knows the reason. I had to surrender needing to know, to require knowing. And that's a big part of surrender, I think, for all of us at any given point in life is the surrender. How much do we need to surrender? Everything that we're not in control of. What are we not in control of? Most everything, right? And so the more and this has been my surrender has been my word. That was what happened then, but it's been my word for since I was striving to sell my practice and that wasn't happening. Another revisiting of, and then wanting to try to hold tighter and make it happen because I needed it to happen. And it was in the surrender that it happened like that. Once the surrender was really made, and then it happened even on the day that came to me that it's just I don't know. It's just I'm never cease to be amazed at life and what God does and
so here's something interesting, Matthew. So with my dad, it's almost like inverted, where like my mom, him and my mom were married 36 years before she lost her battle to cancer. And I think that was like 5, 6 years ago. So it's like he had the love of his life until all of a sudden he didn't. And he never
right.
pictured that he was going to outlive her.
Right,
because
right.
of, his family line with, just health. He was like, oh, she's
Mhm.
typically, I think women live longer than men.
Yeah,
And then this tragedy happens. And yet again, some other woman comes into his life, perfect timing. And now, as a larger family, we're celebrating, her son getting married. And now he's part of like our family and he's, met his fiance. And there's just always beauty in life that
yeah,
we wouldn't have had
right.
it been that my dad didn't start over and my mom hadn't passed. And I just remember being like I didn't want my mom to die at 62. Like
Yeah,
nobody did.
no,
But
no.
yet her desire wouldn't have been that a tragedy that took her out would then all of a sudden make it so that I don't experience life.
Right, right.
Like her
Yeah,
prayer for me is like, hey, something bad happened, but I want you to find meaning in this. And I
right.
want you
Yeah,
to then be able to have resilience so you can rise above anything that gets thrown your way
right,
instead of her tragedy being something that then all of a sudden takes everybody out. Like that's
right.
not what
Yeah.
she would have wanted. Just like
No,
your first
no.
wife. It's
Yeah,
like, well, then live and live boldly and
yes,
live in such a way that you can make such an impact
right,
because in some weird way there's a gift that you were given. And
right.
that is that you felt deeply. You went through suffering in a way that a lot of people don't know what that feels like. But a lot of people do. Like pain and suffering is
Yeah,
what unites us as
yeah,
humans.
yeah, yeah,
And you did the work and you leaned into it. I can't believe that you would have people, people plus purpose if it wasn't for you
yeah,
yielding
yeah,
that place of pain and discovering the beauty that could be born in that place of you
right.
actually just going through the process, which was
Yeah,
so hard. So I just
yeah,
want to honor you, Matthew. Like, thank you for all those times when no one saw you saying yes, you getting back up, you choosing life when right before you was a way of victimhood and a fortress of victimhood that would have just kept you bound.
yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I received that.
So here
Yeah.
you are. And at what point when you're doing chiropractic, are you realizing, like you said, I'm really more interested in the blockages? And were you making that connection of, wow, I went through grief. Wow, I had to process this challenging stuff. So now almost like I'm more equipped to be able to help my patients. Was that something that was pretty evident to you early on?
I know. I think it went on for a while before I was truly conscious of it. I mean, I think I was deeper sensitivities were occurring without my intent. I honestly think I started to care more deeply. This was kind of, yeah, I mean, I was a sole, breadwinner, right, for six people. I had six people I was caring for. So there were those financial pressures as a small business owner professional. But I think beneath that was this was the evidence building of the care, kind of the response to my commitment, right? That particular day, the response, something continuing to stir in me that made me notice more deeply, that made me want to serve and help more, to go beyond what was the basic expectation that I should be delivering on, right? Um, so and then I think I tuned in more in my conversations, everything from when I would do an initial case history with a new patient coming in to the conversations that would occur on the table. And I did open room adjusting. And so it was, um, so it was a very interesting experience of shared stories and things. Um, but I think I started paying more attention to those mental, emotional things of noticing and asking another deeper question sometimes to people and realizing that there were other things that were going on that preceded this low back pain where I can't walk. And then started realizing all sorts of not just somatic, typical spinal extremity and all that pains, but other health benefits that were occurring emotional changes, anxiety, depression. So, and I think that was in part because chiropractic in upgrade, removing interference, upgrading nervous system function. But I also think it was part of deeper healing based upon the intent of the deliverer, or maybe the extent of the connection between the doctor and the patient that receives beyond what was, the basic thing that would occur if somebody was just delivering a physical force, right? Doing something like that. So it transcended, and that's what prompted the book. There were miracle things happening. And at the time, I was thinking, well, I mean, I don't think I saw it for some of what I just said there. I think I saw it because I was so focused. I loved studying the research of what really chiropractic did for people, that especially since I was up against, especially starting back in the early 80s, like I did, up against a culture that did not drive through a chiropractic office when social media came and all of that. And in certain parts of the country, I think it advanced further, faster than others, of a greater receptivity and acknowledging of alternative approaches. That it was, people who were going, these drugs are not working, or that doesn't even make sense. That's my problem, deficient in that. And so, but I think that's those miraculous changes prompted the book. So I spent 3 years of my spare time, uh, because it was in me to do it, to write that. And that's what changed into the next direction. So it was really the writing of that book, and that opened opportunities. I pursued media opportunities. Um, I had speaking opportunities that got me in front of different audiences of people. I had always been patient focused and never had any desire to go laterally to influence peers, other business owners. That was never on my mind. In fact, I didn't even like a lot of fellow chiropractors, if I'm honest. I thought they were thinking too small. I thought they were, playing insurance games that they needed to get over. And, I thought, eh. So I got to where I got, which was, I built a very successful practice that was mostly cash, and, at a time where that was less common. Because I got away from a lot of the limiting influences of some of the other thinkers. But that's what led me to this. And it was like, oh, I just felt like a chapter kind of was starting to end. And somebody even asked me, they said, so at one point, I said, are you happy to keep going with the chiropractic? I never stopped loving the immediacy of the moment of working with a patient. I never stopped loving that. I'd done it. I'd done it for 33 years. I felt like there's something else. There's something else happening that I feel like I'm being called to do. I don't even know. And other people were going, that doesn't even make any sense. Like I had people I was interviewing for a podcast at that time, and they said, why would you do that? And I was surprised that they even asked the question, because some of these I thought were big thinkers and like authors and speakers. And I'm going, why are you asking me that question? That seems silly for you to ask me that. I get other people, but why, because I've done it and I could do it in my sleep. And I promised that I was not going to do it in my sleep. And so I needed the new challenge. It was a different something out there. And I had no idea it would lead to exactly what I'm doing now. But I just kept walking, right? I just kept walking. And this is where I've ended up. And I see all the connection points along the way. And to me, it seems really connected by what I was doing in chiropractic, the vision I saw, and what I see when I meet a new person now that I'm going to help.
So I just recently heard a podcast, and it probably makes sense just not to drop names, but the person that was being interviewed, pretty good thinker, and he was saying his contention was he believes that some people have never actually really heard their own voice, like in their mind, meaning they have so many other thoughts and so many other people's thoughts and the world's thoughts and the programming that they don't actually ever quiet down enough to align themselves with like almost like who they are, to be able to hear like what do you want?
Yeah,
Almost that idea of like some people don't know they have permission
yeah,
to pursue a dream that might be on their heart, because they're so disconnected from their hearts. So they're
Right.
living this very intellectual, mind-based life. And by intellectual, I don't mean deep. I just mean it's a very mind-first approach of just we're responding, we're going. It's not very oriented to essence and who they
Right.
are.
Yeah.
And yet sometimes pain can even be that almost plumb line that can
Yeah.
take us to essence
Right.
if we sit with it.
Right.
Um, Before we kind of delve into so much of what I want to get into, what would you say to someone, Matthew, that had a tragedy that maybe they don't know how to reconcile, or maybe they're even realizing now, like, huh, maybe I didn't go through the five stages or whatever they are of grief, or maybe I thought that meant I'd have to be stuck as a victim. You overcame in such a glorious way. Just what would you say to someone like that that might be in an earlier stage and they're still just in pain?
I would say first is accept where you are. Like let yourself be wherever you are, because that's the only place you are, is there. That's mostly what I wanted from other people at that point to allow me to be where I was. I wasn't super receptive initially to people trying to change me to make me try to make me be somewhere else. Um, I think sitting with people, being with somebody, those few people that actually see you, hear you, can just sit with you without trying to change you. That was what a lot of what I needed. Because I think there is that basic acceptance. So if you don't start there, then I don't think you can see very clearly where you might go. So, relative to those stages of grieving, I mean, am I still in denial that this is the reality? Like, where's my fight?
Mm.
What could I notice just by sneaking up on myself, peeking over my shoulder and catch myself where I'm struggling? Just like I think another piece of that that's key is can I sneak up on myself and catch myself in some joy? Because it's like surprise.
And then
I
you feel guilty. You almost feel like, wait a second. I mean, depending on how close it is to some incidents of tragedy, you
Yeah,
almost feel like, well, I don't have permission to feel this good. It's too
right.
soon. Like
Yeah,
it's almost like I'm not honoring of the tragedy or the loss.
yeah,
So you know what I mean? Sometimes we even when good things happen, we feel trapped by them, or we feel
yeah,
like we don't have permission to actually experience
yeah,
something joyful.
yeah. So I think with that, I think that's true. And I think if we can see something as it like this wasn't an end, this was a transition.
Mm.
Because a lot of it seems like it's really final. I felt like all that was really final at first. Like like I died, right? And when it's something like that to where like I the way I look at it is getting married, like we became one flesh, right? If we're going to be one, then there's no way that you don't get ripped in half when a spouse dies. And there's other equivalent experiences, I think, that could feel that same way. I mean, I was ripped. So if I define that as final, or if I can't get past seeing that as final, even if I define it feel it that way at first, then what am I moving toward?
Mm.
Not There's no forward motion. There needs to be, as soon as possible, the beginnings of some forward motion. Well, what's my forward motion to? Well, we have to start to get a glimpse of, like if I was rowed my boat out into the lake and something bad happened, but I can't go back to the previous shore. My world has changed when I was out there. I can't go back to that. So there needs to be a continuation to go forward, which means there's something on the other side of the lake. And I have to find my way to keep going and begin to get a sense of some compelling future, something that draws me. And part of what you were saying earlier, it's like if I can tap into something like a voice of a message of something that wants to transform, that could be meaningful out ahead, then that can begin to guide the destination. You don't have to know where you're going. I'll often kind of tell people it's like if you are people tell me sometimes relative to their business, if I dream about something. Well, what if it doesn't, that's not what happens? Like if I put energy into that and then that doesn't happen, I said, well, if you kind of, if you're in, uh, you're in Oklahoma and you generally set something that would say Portland, Oregon, and you find yourself in Georgia or Florida, then you probably it's like maybe that's the wrong direction. But you can always make mid-course corrections because you don't know necessarily whether it's Portland or not. You're just moving. You're just not staying stuck there.
Mm.
And that the opportunities for joy again, for fulfillment, for contribution are often not visible from where we sit or stand, right? Sometimes it's like, I'm not going to go until I see. No, I mean, I so much of the time I have to go down a long corridor and it's none of those doors, or maybe there's no, it doesn't look like there's any doors at all for a while. You got to go around the corner and from there you can see what that is, which means we have to be willing to keep moving. We have to
So
try.
I love that metaphor. So the one that I typically use is I think of myself as a sailboat in the harbor. And instead of it simply just being a sailboat that has its anchor down in the harbor, I think of the harbor being shrouded in fog.
Mm,
And yet I'm demanding, I need clarity. I need to be able to see before I lift anchor. And truth is, I need to set out, I need to put my sails up, try to sense the wind a little bit. And
right.
at some point, the fog might lift and I get some clarity.
Yeah.
But I almost feel like the fog is actually meant to almost
Yeah.
qualify your authenticity, your desire. Like how bad do you want it? If a little bit of fog, a little bit of a lack of clarity is going to keep you in the land of excuses, and I mean this with compassion. I don't mean
Yeah. Yeah.
I've I've been the timid soul that's like, I'm scared to move because I can't see. I don't
Sure.
know that there's going to be reassurance and a
Right.
guarantee that it's
Yeah.
going to work, that it's going to be better off if I move, that it's going to be something where I'm safe. And
Right.
yet I feel like there's that fog and it always just mocks me. And and yet I know the second I set sail, lift up the anchor, and start heading into the unknown, the anchor I actually need to have as I lift the true anchor is trust. I need to know that I
Yeah.
can yield, be in the
Yeah.
place of surrender and
Yeah.
trust.
Yeah.
And that always takes me to the point where all of a sudden I get through the fog and I start seeing. And it doesn't mean I see 100 miles down and I know exactly where that beautiful island or mountain is that I want to reach. It just gives me enough clarity to feel like, you know what, this was the right decision. And now I
Right.
have peace to keep going.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think trust and right along kind of associated with that is faith because it's a walk by faith, by trust. Um, and I think fear is just such a prevalent emotional challenge. I mean, that's a big part of the what we do with that is a big part of emotional agility, right? As we were talking about earlier. Because if when fear comes, when we feel threatened, when we feel danger, when we feel a big risk, then what do we do with that? I think typically we tend to go to control. I'm going to hold tighter. I'm going to steer harder. I'm going to require absolutes. I'm going to manage the people around me. I'm going to, from a fear place, to try to get back into some sense of I'm okay. It's by control. And the
Mm.
truth of it is, it's not really that. That control and fear and control becomes this I've learned some of this. I've just keep learning in the last couple few years. So one thing to say is that it's never too old to learn stuff, but it's an ongoing growth journey, right? But that just keeps spinning, and those were a lot of my tendencies, right? Like I said before, like I being a valedictorian. Well, what was that about? Is that really, made my life necessarily better? It was really, I look at it now more. I mean, yes, it was shows my determination, but it also we could equally say it shows my control tendencies to manage the environment enough to go, I'm going to achieve at a high level because I need to achieve at a high level to be valid, to feel like I'm somebody, right? And so control efforts can be the thing that actually sabotage us being able to listen, being able to hear anything new, being able to do well with other humans. And instead, I feel like the answer is surrender. It comes back to surrender, which requires trust and faith that I'm going to be okay, and a presence with wisdom to walk and get clarity as you walk, that some of that fog lifts as you walk, and I'm okay, and I'm still okay. But if there's no faith, there's no trust, I honestly, I don't know how to answer that anymore. Like, I tried, and that never worked. I mean, it just never worked. And I'm a high achieving person who's accomplished stuff. And yet, I was not joyful enough of the time because of that. And it's the game has changed for me. It's still changing. Like this last few months, this last year, I mean, I feel like I'm moving into another phase of like I show up wherever I show up, and there's going to be something that happens there that's going to be good. And I don't have to know all those things. And also a faith that the money that's needed will also show up. That's a faith trust thing. Doesn't mean I don't try to make wise decisions. It doesn't mean being reckless. It's not that way of looking at it. It's just, but I don't know how to tell people how to make life better without them exploring that. Whatever that means, it means a certain thing for me from my in my specific faith perspective. But I think people need to locate that because it's a part of a spiritual essence that's true of all of us, whether people deny that or not.
I was literally just going to say, so Matthew, it sounds like you're bringing up a spiritual dimension. And tell me in which ways you think there's interplay between a healthy emotional dimension and then maybe how that helps spiritually being healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like still making a lot of connections and I think that's part of why I love emotional agility coaching. So yes, I mean, you mentioned taking the assessments. So I've created I've been using assessments 27 years now, I think. Most of those years were not my assessments. I got certified in that. I always loved the psychology, brain science, human behavior. I loved understanding myself and other people and then seeing how I could help them understand things. But I was approached, just for context in this, I was approached probably 6 to 7 years ago with an opportunity for an app, a hiring app,
Mhm.
and paid actually to create my own assessments. I was offered the opportunity and they were going to pay me to do it. I was going to keep access to the assessments. They were mine, but white label it for their use. And well, that business didn't get past enough funding hurdles. They didn't have good leadership,
Mhm.
and it died. Uh, and I tried to do everything I could to even help support them and even try to coach them to where they needed some solutions so that because I thought they had a great idea. The good news of that was I probably never would have put all the blood, sweat, and tears, time, energy, complexity into areas that I wasn't skilled, where I didn't know, and I had to get the answers and find other people who had the answers so I could know how to do this. Um, and I probably wouldn't have done it. And yet it's been a massive, like, next phase game changer for me to then, just like I had a new client this morning, a first coaching call with a business owner who is doing amazing things, but has too many things going, and uh, has some emotional challenges woven in, like almost every business owner does. And we looked at her core four assessment results. So as I started to say, I created nine. I have four that I call my core four, which is behavioral, cognitive, inspirational, and emotional.
I think those are the ones I took. So
Yeah,
those are the ones that I.
yeah, they are. And so as I was coaching her, looking through the lens of those, and the way I orient to assessments is not something that is puts anybody in a box, not something that's forever descriptive of the person, but shows combinations of strengths and tendencies. And that's been something for me to coach through the assessments. Not only I've been doing assessments and coaching through them for a lot of years, but to coach through the ones that I developed, even for me, gives more power. There's more power because that's I'm seeing through that all the time. So I was able to guide her into some things just in this first session that I feel like when we hung up, that change had already really started. Something really good that was already breakthrough happening that would not, I don't feel like would have happened as much without me seeing what she said through these assessments about her strengths, who she is and who she's kind of not, or who she's not being anyway, even if I can't always say who she's not, but who she may be not being. And so we had a great conversation. She asked some great questions. And I think we came to some first steps of some things for her to look at and some changes to consider. And I'm excited. But honestly, I think those assessments were a guiding power that allowed that to occur. So, back to what you asked me, then, one of those is emotional agility. And I think our emotions are so close to that spiritual essence of who we are, that deeper meaning and purpose for what we're doing on the planet, and the emotions interplay pro or con with that. They're the biggest interference sometimes, or the greatest guide. And so to me, it's such a launching pad. That's why they're all important, I think. All four of those dimensions are important. But I love to coach on emotional agility because it leads to the deepest conversations faster. It leads to conversations kind of, more like what we're having. And this is not a normal conversation. This is not a normal conversation. We don't know each other that well yet, but we're getting to know each other quite well now. But most people don't go quickly to conversations remotely like this. And so if I can cheat through the assessment insights that they told me about themselves and then bring that back to them, we get into deeper stuff fast.
Well, so I'll tell you why. Part of why we're able to do this. So I took the emotional agility one, and there's 5 different categories for our listeners: self-awareness and impact, self-management, inspired engagement, compassionate understanding, and relationship influence. And as you know, since you created these, 3 of them are personal, and 2 of them are interpersonal. So my overall score was 70. Cool. My my average for the personal was 61, but my average for the interpersonal was 83. So I don't handle myself well, but I'm much more gifted at interpersonally being
Yeah,
able to sit with people and their
yeah,
emotions
yeah,
and go to a place of depth and authenticity and intimacy.
yeah.
Which I my lowest was inspired engagement. So I'm all curious about that. But before we dive specifically into this, I'm so curious, Matthew, on your take on AI. Now, why I'm referring to this is because you made a comment a while back about, well, who we are is not simply just our IQ. It's not just our intelligence. And IQ is completely eaten up by AI, like meaning we cannot compete. It's a large language model, a neural network that
Right.
is just eons past what we're able to do. So then that kind of starts asking questions of like, well, what makes us
Yes.
distinctly human, or what could make us distinctly valuable in the upcoming decade as AI is emerging? And I think it has much more to do with the dimension of when the spiritual and the emotional probably are intersecting, because it's clearly not simply what we know, but our ability to care, our ability to hold space with other people,
Right.
to actually achieve intimacy, into me you see,
Yeah,
being known and knowing someone else.
yeah,
So just curious your thoughts on that because I'm fascinated by AI. I've gone to a few conferences about AI, because I want to leverage it for business and everything like that.
sure.
But I
Yeah,
also want to know in what ways is it going to threaten or destabilize value when it comes to like a business deliverable?
right. Yeah,
And I was honestly shocked that it didn't look like it initially was threatening programming, formulas, mathematics, but it actually was threatening creative fields like writing.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
like that was kind of a shock to me because I kind of thought, well, that's someone's unique perspective. That you need to have a unique perspective in order to write well. And I still maintain that someone's individuality, someone's story, someone's unique perspective and expertise makes a whole of who they are. And that's why that's still, I think, their best strategy for success today is to align what they're doing with that. Like, meaning AI will never have your story.
right.
AI
Yeah,
didn't experience tragedy and pain.
right, right,
AI didn't walk through what you did.
right.
So even if they can know what you know,
Yeah, yes,
they can't actually relate in the way that you can.
yeah. Well, my short answer is I agree with everything you just said. So we could move on to the next topic, or no, I think you're exactly right. And I think, I mean, we often said relative to like movement into the industrial age and then moving from the industrial age to more of an information age and all of those things, finding those things that, oh, we're had to be developed more, emphasized more, um, because this is as we like, industry machinery has now taken over certain things. Well, and we thought, oh, well, because we're smart enough, our computational abilities are enough, right? Then that'll cover us. And it not only will we save from a lot of the physical labor stuff, certain things got easier, but we're still valuable because we've got all these smarts. True. And we're pretty amazing a lot of the time is what humans can do compared to anything else. But that being said, we are confronted with this AI thing that is making us humans look really slow, really not as creative, certainly not as creative as quickly. So thought processes can't be enough, right? And I've told people before, it's like no matter, I mean, there's certain tasks, like if we go back to chiropractic, as I think about my son at his office this morning, that that's not going to be replaced by AI, by a robot, because there's an informational determination based on a lot of sensitive elements to determine where and how and why to adjust and not to, but also all that occurs that is mental, that is emotional, spiritual connectedness in healing that a robot is unlikely to ever capture, right? So I think in so many things, the humanity of what we bring is not our mental capacities. It is those emotional sensitivities. And we could say, well, I mean, will machines be able to simulate emotional sensitivities? I mean, they're working on it, right? But I don't believe it'll be the same. I think that's part of where the risk comes in with AI because they don't have a lot of those emotional sensitivities, or that'll be hard to come by. Also, who's programming and influencing that to what end? That scares me a little bit. But even more than on the spiritual side, you know, how does this fit into a spiritual warfare battle? What is this being, is it being used for good or is it being used for evil? In addition to just possible errors, I mean, there's malice of intent possibilities in there too. But I think for job security, I'm often telling people this is where developing your strengths in those things that are uniquely human, these deeper quality offerings of your humanity to people, you won't be replaced to the degree that you have skill sets there. That's harder for people who are not don't have the facility of communication, expression. You know, you and I have been given gifts to be able to articulate things, and and so that may be a more of a challenge for certain people to go there. But I still think it's necessary to have that to go to that investigation, to find those stories, to find those deeper purposes, and to take risks to influence people with your humanity, even if it's scary, even if you might be rejected, even if, you know, nobody seems to care. I mean, do it anyway.
Okay, so if I'm listening and I'm like, well, Matthew, how would I know? Like, meaning what yellow flags or possible red flags might be showing up in and around me, maybe in relationships, or in my emotional state when it comes to depression, that might be an indicator that I don't have high emotional agility. What would people be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, that very first element of self-awareness and impact, um, one could make an initial argument that if one had lower self-awareness and impact, then one might be semi-oblivious to the symptom clues in the first place.
Hmm.
You know, it's like just like a physical pain. Maybe I'm less attuned to my body, and therefore there are symptom clues, and I don't even know I have symptom clues. I failed to even attend to that. Maybe I was distracted looking in other places. Maybe I'm just not that sensitive to those things. So, where I have high thresholds, right, before something gets my attention. So I think the same is true emotionally, is, you know, where are those thresholds? So I think, you know, are we experiencing more anxiety, more frustration, more worry, more sense of overwhelm, more general turmoil, more anger? Are we holding tightly to things? Can't relax, can't sleep as well as we used to, can't turn our brain off. Those are all indications like from within. And then what are the relational dynamics? Are we less patient with other people? Are we demanding and requiring, expecting, demanding, requiring things of people that we think they're falling short on all the time? Are we pushing people rather than maybe inspiring people? Are we micromanaging them? Are we checked out and doing the opposite of micromanaging and not really showing up? So I think those are things. What's if we look at our spouse or significant other, we look at our kids, we were to ask any of them, what would they say about how our emotions are influencing? We asked our team. I can't tell you how many
That sounds
really,
that sounds really scary,
it
Matthew.
is, it is a little scary. It's a risk I will offer to people to take, and some bravely take me up on it. Others have to work up to that. But but it's amazing to me. Maybe it shouldn't be amazing, but I guess maybe it still is a little bit. How many genius, smart people I work with who are incredibly technically skilled, but nobody ever helped them learn these emotional agility skills, or emotion, you know, paying attention to that. Is like that even a thing? I created a new scorecard for people to take, a little 3-minute free scorecard called the Business Emotional Health Scorecard. Well, initial thought is like, is that even a thing? What is business emotional health? And it's like, that's like soft skills kind of stuff. Well, it's human skills, right? These are human skills. Oh, okay, I guess human skills are probably okay.
Because we show up as humans in business, right?
Right. So we're taking a temperature, we're taking a score here to look at, you know, because the research is really clear that the people relationship side is a much bigger issue. The experts have rendered their opinions. They've done studies on these things to show that more than technical financial, it's the people relational. The people are the biggest costs in our businesses. And are they the greatest assets? Most of the time, not. Most of the time, we're not. Why did Gallup say that 70% approximately globally of workers are not engaged? Why are they not engaged? Why do they not really care about
This
what the
keeps
heck
this
they're
keeps
doing?
happening, Matthew, where I'm just like I'm thinking something, and then like 20 seconds later you mention it. Because I was just gonna mention Gallup and how they had that whole study
Yeah,
about it's the manager. That's why
yeah,
they came up with that book.
right, yeah,
And I was reading the intro to this, I don't know, 8 years ago, and it just hit me as like crazy common sense, where finally I was like, their basic conclusion was something like, hey, even though there's always hacks on leadership and management and like how to get people to perform better, surprisingly, if you actually care about somebody and you genuinely show up as a person to another person, almost everything else falls in line. And it was almost like instead of all these disparate attempts to
right,
deconstruct humans
right,
into these psychological creatures that we can manipulate for gain,
yeah, yeah,
when we did this study, we kind of found out at the heart of it, if you're a good person and you see someone, you care about someone, everything else kind of follows.
yeah, yeah,
And it was so liberating to me to be like, I've always said, okay, my plumb line is I'm going to be heart-centered first, and I'm going to be authentic and genuine, and then I'll apply hacks almost from the outside in. I don't, not from the inside out. Like my insight isn't a hack. I'm not faking something. I'm not performing. I'm
right,
being.
right,
But if there's little things on the outside I could, tweak to elevate, okay, sounds great. But I'm
yeah,
going to show up real.
yeah,
And I almost felt like that study just gave me permission to be like, you're on the right track, Sean.
yeah,
Like, don't abandon this for
yes,
some short-sighted, temporary bump in performance that isn't sustainable because it's actually not about people.
right, yeah. Yeah, I think that comes back to the AI conversation and what the robots are going to do. It's almost like we're trying to teach hacks to robots to how to pretend like they are humans. Well, let's just keep developing those truly human strengths and skills, and then you're right, people might actually engage. They might actually be inspired. And also, what's the treasure is another thing that just came to mind. It's like I've been thinking about this. It's like I've been thinking about it relative to God. Are we, but it also applies equally to other people in our lives. Are we doing what we're doing? Are we engaging because we want something? We're trying to get something, or is the treasure in the relationship? Is the treasure in the being? Like, is the treasure in being with God, or is the treasure in
What I can get
what I
because
can get?
of the status
Right.
or
Whether I, even if I'm in regular touch versus just a foxhole prayer when I'm somehow in some dire straits, either way, what is really the heart intent here? And I think relationships are most amazing when the intent is just to be with you. And even like the structure of the format of this conversation, it's like, what's the intent? The intent is for you and I to be together and have a conversation. Oh, that's an interesting intent. It's like, well, but what's the end game? Somebody asked me that recently, about somebody else, and they were saying, well, like, what's their end game? And I said, what? I don't even like that weird transactional way that you're framing that. What do you like? Their end game, it all sounds totally contrived and manipulative. How about there's no big end game? There might be some desires, there might be some preferences, but maybe we need to reframe some of the language that we're using.
well also I think it's something where we've kind of been fed a lie that the outcome, the destination, almost like the Machiavellian thinking that it justifies the means. And we don't realize we all have really in tune BS meters. And you can tell. I don't know if it's just because of bad salesmanship over 20 years or marketing that's gotten manipulative, where you're just like, I can tell. When all of a sudden someone reaches out to you and you're like, oh my gosh, like I haven't heard from this person in a while. Like this is so delightful. And then 15 minutes into the next conversation, you find out it's because they're part of a multi-level marketing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And all of a sudden there's the ask, and you're just like, oh, I got duped. I really thought maybe they were just thinking about me. I really
Right.
thought maybe
Yeah.
they were honoring the relationship and they were
Yeah.
honoring that place and time when we connected.
Yeah.
And it was just a no strings attached. How you doing? But it
Yeah.
wasn't, because it was
Right.
something about their upward aim. It was
Right.
something about, oh, now I can help them on that path. And I think what I meant by we've been lied to is that we think people can't see through that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like we've been told, no, no, no. We all just respect the upward aim to the point that, like, go ahead, be ambitious, like desire self-exaltation above all. And it's okay if people, like, like, it's okay if they're there to help prop you up. And it's like, no, we actually are really in tune at telling, hold on a second. Are you here because you're trying to use this for something else?
Right.
You are. And what does that do? That just cuts off intimacy.
Right.
It
Yeah.
cuts off, it cuts off the power
Right.
of like genuine connection.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think about LinkedIn, and I think about how many people where I'll accept a connection request, and it's just moments sometimes. And sometimes it'll be longer than moments, but sometimes it's just moments, and I get the immediate pitch for something that, and it's just like I just said yes to the smallest first date of us getting to know each other. I don't know you. I don't know that I need this. And obviously, you're not even interested. So, I mean, it's that extreme on the one end. But then we could also throw the whole baby out with the bathwater and say that that's just because that those platforms and that kind social media is just manipulative. Well, I mean, we could be tainted and go, that's all it could be. But we also know that it can be a way to actually connect. And you and I met through a mutual person that we know and were part of a networking group call. Well, that kind of thing could be completely manipulative and selfish, or it could be a group of people who actually care about getting to know each other over time, and business can occur. And the best business that occurs is because people actually got to know, like, and trust each other, right? And I think we're in this world of information and technology where we're looking for those, back to hacks again, we're looking for shortcuts to get a result from somebody. But we would never do some of those things. Well, I should say never. We rarely would do those things in person, right? Like if I just met you somewhere in person, like, and then just 10 seconds later, you pitch me on some biggest sale possibility. You don't even know who I am.
Hey, my name's Sean. I'm Matthew. Hey, how you doing? Oh, by the way, I can help you by, even if we did like a perfect elevator pitch, I
Yeah.
help these people level up this way, and here's the pain that like, it would just be so weird.
Yeah, it is. It
Like
is.
it doesn't fit.
No.
Matthew, you said treasure, and that whole concept of what you were thinking about, I think, is incredibly profound. Where is your treasure in relationships with God? And the thing that it kind of reminded me of is like, I think sometimes for me, I get scared. Maybe scared is not the right word. One of the biggest challenges for me is when I actually come face to face with something in me that is kind of wretched. So an example would be, I'm wanting to spend time with God just for the sake of spending time with God. I'm actually trying to behold Him, listen, just spend time, like no agenda. And then all of a sudden I get like a little insight or revelation. And immediately I picture how that revelation could preach. I immediately picture how I could almost like use that, or, use that in leverage in like something. And I'm like, why do I immediately go to the way I can monetize, scale? Now, and part of that isn't bad. Like part of that is like, I'm a creative person. I
Right.
like building. And I
Right.
think God is so much more gracious,
Yeah.
but I'm thankful, at least I'm aware to be checking my heart and being like, if that's all that I'm caring about,
Right.
I'm just here so I can get something and then I'm bouncing.
Right.
Um, I don't like the things that make it so that I can't actually focus on
Right.
what is most important. It's like if you're on a date with your wife and
Yeah.
you're at dinner, the greatest gift you can have is the gift of being present,
Yeah.
like truly present. So every now and then she'll, like, depending on where they want to seat us, she'll be like, Sean, do you want this seat? Because then you can't see the TV. Because she knows I'm very visual and I'll get distracted. And
Right.
she
Yeah.
knows I don't want to be distracted.
Yeah.
I want to be fully present. So yeah, I don't know if that's a self-awareness thing. I don't really know where to go with that. It was just something that I got inspired as you were saying the whole treasure
Yeah.
thing.
Well, I think it ties in that I think we are intrinsically selfish beings, right? I
I
mean,
am.
we could go back in the story and say, maybe in our most fundamental essence, we are not, that we're better than that. But evidence would show in the lives that humans live that, and which is the basis for wars and lots of things, right? It's mine, it's my control, it's my stuff, it's my and not yours. And, um, but I think as kids, I mean, look at kids. You don't have to, as people have said before, you don't have to teach a kid to be selfish. I mean, kids are, it's mine. This is what they want, and they don't like it to be told no. And I think that as we get older, we are given opportunities to witness some of these things. And I think one question sometimes to ask, especially if we suspect that our treasure might be misplaced, is what is it that I'm needing?
Mhm.
What am I needing? Even like um, it could be true in personal relationships, in a marriage. I mean, most of what goes wrong, and if somebody were to ask prior to a divorce, back it up further before you got there. What is it you're needing? I'm needing something. Maybe my expectations are inappropriate, but regardless of whether they're appropriate or not, I've felt needs, and I think team members, leaders, I mean, people have needs for things. So are those needs reasonable? Are those requests reasonable? Are those needs being met? And I think our ability to just kind of like in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Certain foundational needs need to be met before you get to some loftier elements, bigger options. I don't even care about those options. If I can't eat, if I don't have a place to sleep, then so I think the ability to transcend ourselves to serve other people, because I think that that's where the greatest joy comes in so much of the time is when we're other focused and we're serving others, but I can't serve others like back to the emotional agility. And I've got a diagram called the states of experience diagram that I like to coach off of. And I coach emotional agility relative to the states of experience. I always kind of have it on my desk here in front of me. But when we're on the left side of the diagram, which is high negative or low negative stress, then it's we're carrying baggage, and therefore we don't have the bandwidth to help carry anybody else's. We're surviving, we're not thriving, and therefore we're not serving. We're really, if we're serving, we're self-serving, we're struggling, we're trying to be okay. And as long as we're living like that, and we're all like that to some degree, then it becomes easy to get caught in all the selfish pieces. So that comes back again to self-awareness. Am I aware of my state? Can I see how my state is this a state I want? Is this constructive? Is this helpful right now? Can I see what the impact of my state is on the people around me, on the goals I feel like I'm trying to accomplish? Is it consistent with my values? Or do I want to change something? And then that's where the self-management, the second piece comes in, is how willing and able am I to shift to and to increase my skill sets of body, mind, spirit skill sets so that I can be in a high positive stress state instead of a high negative stress state. So I can accomplish great things and have a spillover influence on the other people around me, that people are inspired. People are like, hey, I want to be a part of that, as opposed to getting squashed, and frustrated. And so And then both of those influence how much our inspired engagement is. Like, I have a hard time internally being motivated if those first two are constantly,
Mm.
if I'm operating from on the negative, then it's hard to keep up the motivation to create from inside, to not get caught on external rewards or consequences. So I lose the reason why I was even trying to do it. And that was all like from an emotional basis. My head says this, my heart says I don't give a crap because I'm drowning in other stuff within me. And then back to what you said earlier, it's not an uncommon thing to have internal, I don't want to say dysfunction, well, maybe, or lowered skill sets emotionally, internally, and yet to either because we do have strong interpersonal, like natural styles that are better for interpersonal, or because we have to, because we've got to come out and play. And because we have to come out and play, we summon the willpower, the energy to be on display, to do our best to make a workplace go, to keep a job, to keep a family together. But it takes way more energy because we're being depleted from underneath all the time from internal states that are working to kind of sabotage. Those are not healed. Those are not strong. Those are not developed. So it's like but on the outside, hey, looks great. Surprised that anybody would have any rotting elements within them because it looks so rosy on the outside. So that's a lot of what happens, but it gets exhausting. It gets exhausting, and that's where authenticity gets challenged, I think, to some degree, because we have to present better than we really are.
Okay, so if I could kind of just, I don't want to say summarize, but this is what I've gleaned in this conversation. Um, the importance of emotional agility. Like when I think about the fact that everybody in life has the bottleneck of time, and I don't necessarily mean we don't know how many years we've been given, but within every single year that we're here, we have 24 hours to do what we want to do with it. And yet, if we don't have emotional agility and we're not very healthy, then we're burdened by things that we don't need to be burdened by. We could be more isolated in the sense of not being able to connect as rich, not being able to connect as deeply. Like you said, not being almost as whole and aligned in who we are. And it's like my fundamental belief has always been that everyone is a gift, that everyone reflects some aspect of the divine. But with, you know, the knives and, the arrows that have gotten, shot into our soul because life can be hard,
Right.
then there's bitterness, and then there's resentment, and then there's shame, and there's these toxins.
Yes.
And if we don't know how to handle them,
Yes.
then it's like we're not shining brightly. We're holding back, and we don't even know it. We're going through life and we're not being as bright and vibrant and brilliant as we could, which
Mhm.
means our impact is not as
Right.
significant, which means our fulfillment with relationships is not as good.
Right.
So emotional agility, whether you're at a 80 or whether you're at a 50, everybody, and it's in everyone's best interest to elevate it in some way because it's just going to enrich
Yes.
your experience in life.
Yeah.
Does that sound about accurate?
I think that's very well said. And we didn't even touch, like when I've taught doctors, I've looked at what the research shows when you live on the left half of this diagram and live at high negative or low negative of apathy, depression, going through the motions. But it's like I'm not in flow. And a lot of this is based on Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's book on flow, finding flow. Good stuff if you've maybe read that, because you're a well-read guy, I can tell. Um, but it's like, what happens to our DNA? What happens to our brain rewiring? What sort of meds are we needing to be bound to that's compromising us and challenging in other ways? Um, if DNA is being damaged and changed, genetic expression, our epigenetic expression of those genes then becomes, so we start making sicker cells and physically we're declining. How much are we more likely to have dementia and focus challenges because we're living impaired on the negative side of the equation? And honestly, my contention is the majority of people, I've taught off this diagram for probably 25, 30 years almost now, is that the majority of people are living more than half of their time on the left half of the diagram. And it's it's like what are various things that add up one little moment at a time, one little piece at a time, like somebody develops. That comes back to Gabor Mate's book, When the Body Says No. Cancer, autoimmune stuff, like how long does that take to develop? How long, day by day by day by day, did we end up there? It's a lot of days. Can I tell that it's happening? No. Can I, it's like decay on our teeth or what? I mean, it's like it's day by day.
Mhm.
So these things are happening. And if we are out of touch, and it's just that the emotions are so powerful. I mean, that was Mate's conclusion, is that blocked emotions are killing us, literally killing us. That's totally different than what we're talking about, whether we're going to have optimal relationships or work success. I
Yeah.
mean, those are really important, but we're sicker and dying because we're not bringing the emotional skill sets to better navigate, to get out of the hole that we can. Back to what you said before, I could have stayed in a hole. I could have. I wasn't willing to stay there, but that required choices and effort and then getting whatever help I needed, whatever coaching to get elevated, to get back in the game fully. And that's where health and vitality is. So I believe it's, resilience. It's tied into resilience. And there was an article that just recently came out about a major study showing how much highly resilient people live, about 10 years longer, they're now saying. I mean, it's just like these studies come out like, oh, I didn't even know they were studying that for the last 10, 20, 50 years and thousands of people. It's like, oh, I didn't know. But they come to conclusions that certain of these things make all the difference. And daily, we're not thinking about that. I don't think like that.
No. And it's this weird, almost like paradox where I feel like emotions, if we are a really like powerfully emotional person, but then don't have the best way of guiding them or handling them, then we can have very strong toxic emotions, which is
Yeah.
dangerous.
Yeah.
But then if we go on the opposite spectrum and say, okay, so then let me distance myself from my emotions and just try to numb out and build a wall between me and them, that's equally unhealthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're really forced to say, hey, we have emotions. They're meant to be a good thing. They're not always good because life can be difficult. So we need to actually own the responsibility of how do we integrate them? How do
Right.
we handle them? How do we have a healthy relationship with them? And it leads me back to this weird, pseudo inappropriate um, joke about the body parts that are like saying, which body parts are the greatest. And the
Right.
eyes like, well, without me, you couldn't this. And the brain's like, well, without me and the heart. And
Right.
then the sphincter's like, hey, if I stop working. And yet it's very true because emotionally, a lot of people are just incredibly constipated. In the natural, you can't
Yeah.
go too many days
Right.
with blockages,
Yeah.
or else you physically will die.
Right.
If
Yeah.
those toxins don't come out, you will get poisoned and die.
Right. Yeah.
And yet emotionally, we're like, oh, it's probably not a big deal if I have a
Yeah.
blockage. It
Yeah.
is a big deal.
Yeah. It is. It just takes longer to express.
Hmm.
Right? Certain blockages, if your heart is, if you've got blockages, major blockages in a major artery, I mean, it may be lights out here soon. But,
Right.
but certain things they're no less meaningful and important for their quietly developing chronic effects. I mean, cancer and heart disease are two great examples of things that just take a long time to occur. It's, and I think the emotions are part of leading to that, but disturbed emotions, dysfunctional emotions can lead to almost anything. It can rob us of so much of what we're doing here. So that's why it's so important. That's why I get Obviously, I'm very passionate about this. I feel like I've made a recent commitment that I just want to help thousands. I created this real short term, like 30-day emotional agility breakthrough program that I'm charging $97 for, right? Which is shouldn't be a big impediment to most people because I'm absolutely committed that if I could have thousands of people go through this, I could make between now and when I leave the planet, I mean, it could be one of the better things I do. And then that can lead into whatever other conversations that are meaningful from that.
So
From
if I'm listening right now, Matthew, how do I know if I'm a good fit? Like, do I have to be a professional? Do I have to be like, do you only work with a certain subset of the population? Um, because I want people to know, like, hey, no, if all of a sudden you're feeling, pulled between the lines of what you're hearing, and you're like, yeah, I think I could level up, or I'm in drastic need of some help.
right.
Who's a good fit for you? Is it pretty much anybody that that
Yeah.
that's breathing right now?
Pretty much. That kind of defies the niche, the narrow niche focus that we're always recommended to narrow it down.
Everyone has emotions, and
Everybody,
everyone could use getting those elevated. So it does sound like
anybody
you
who
can
would
help
like to
anybody.
be a better spouse, a better,
Mm,
a better parent, a
mm.
better business owner, a better
Oh my
team
gosh,
member,
stop
a
talking
better,
about me, Matthew.
you know, then 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 I think it's important. And I think some people, like I just ran a first cohort of 10 people through this new program. And they what they get the first thing they do is they take the emotional agility assessment, get the report on that, and then we're providing all 5 levels of training, all part of this $97. I've got training guides on all 5 of those dimensions, and then we're doing 2 live group coaching calls on to and grabbing behind the scenes people's top emotional challenges and then coaching through those as a group. And so I got really good feedback for this first run through, but we put charts together of these people and didn't put their names on it. And I just showed them so they didn't feel like they were alone in these challenges, right? There were a lot of people with some really low scores. There was really only one person out of the 10 that was pretty solid most of the way through, even still had one weaker link. Everybody else was like, we got some work to do and it's okay. And I mean, together is a great way to do it. So so I don't know if you'll put that in the show notes or
You bet, as 100%. So because it's like people spend money investing in their vehicle to get to where they want to go all the time, right? We need gasoline. And it's like, well, to invest in your emotional energy to get you where you need to go in life, $97 is nothing.
right.
Uh, so where is the actual link? Meaning it's what,
People
peoplepluspurpose.com?
peoplepluspurpose.com/30 30 day EA breakthrough. So it's just a lot of letters.
Yeah,
So
we'll include that in any
yeah,
post we do.
so that because it's not yet linkable directly by going to the website. It will be shortly, but so they have to go to that specific link, and then you could also maybe include that business emotional health free scorecard too. Those would be the couple of main things that I would drive people to check out, and I believe it'll create a world of difference.
Okay, so just super quick. So 70, my overall score for the emotional agility is that like I'm getting a C grade? Is that like average?
No, it's better than a C grade. I mean, I like to be able to see, like, if I can see 75 to 80, I mean, 80 is quite good, 75 is pretty good
Hmm.
because I'm not expecting, I mean, unless people are liars, then there's no, like, 90 to 100 is just not. And in fact, I don't even really want people to be 100 because, like, for compassion and understanding, somebody with 100, even 90s of compassion and understanding, that maybe so empathetic they can't actually do conflict with anybody. And, because I'm so empathetic that I can't even challenge anything, right? I can't even move on with my day. I feel so much of other people's pain, right? So there's an optimal range that's somewhere in there. If people have 40s, 50s, 60s, low 70s on any of those, there's room for improvement, and they'd be better served if they improved it.
Okay, so I just want to go really quick. The seven C's of inspiration. I have threes in the three that are in the 40s. Control, contribution, and challenge.
Now that's going to be different in terms of those scores, different than emotional agility, where
This
we
just
want
shows
just
where I'm inspired. It's not a bad thing to have a low
no,
score.
no, no. So those are just people do say to me sometimes, how do I raise that? It's like, no, something else would have to come down.
Okay, okay,
It's
okay.
choosing this or that over and over again.
Because it's like a motivation
Right. Yeah.
slash
So the
source. Okay.
emotional agility is the only one where we're not comparing something against something else. We're asking questions to say, how well are you doing in this particular area?
So when I look at my cognitive styles, the fact that one of them's 20, does that mean there's something wrong with me?
It means you don't tend to go there.
Okay.
It could mean that, and so for some people, that truly is like my two lowest on cognitive styles. Like nobody should hire me for those things. Nobody, it's like I'm not good at that.
Okay.
And I don't care that much about that. For other people, it might not be that it reflects an absence of skill or complete absence of care. It just may mean that some other things are just far more of a priority or a natural tendency.
Matthew, you are just a gift. I'm so thankful. Big shout out to Jessica Martin for connecting us. I know we got on like a little 15-minute connect call, and I was just like, okay, I want you to join me in the sandbox because your perspective is just so varied and so vast. But yet at the same exact time, there's a lot of people that have great insights, but it's not always coupled with someone that's also just a great individual, a great person that has great heart. And you're the complete package. And it's just been a joy to get to hang out with you today and just share and let you kind of have a little bit more of a platform to talk about what it is that you do. Because as I was saying in my little summary, it's kind of a no-brainer. Like everybody can benefit from elevating their emotional agility. I'm sure every single wife out there is like praying, please have my husband take the course. I really think you probably need to get connected with certain like women's groups or maybe speak at do or something like that so that all the women can introduce you to their husbands because what woman doesn't want a husband that's just more emotionally in tune,
Yeah.
more emotionally just present.
Yeah.
That's one of the greatest gifts we can give to the people we love.
And it's almost like we're expecting these things should be occurring more naturally. But if that's never emphasized, especially if it was not ever modeled in the home you came from, and then stuff happened to complicate your life, I mean, it's not anybody's real fault to a great degree that they don't have skills in this. When in school did they ever teach us any of this? When do people who decide to be entrepreneurs and start a business or become doctors or whatever professional they become? I coach attorneys, and like when in law school was anybody talking about emotional agility? It doesn't happen. So really smart people who are not necessarily super savvy when it
Mhm.
comes to how to deliver on the emotional piece, and it's getting in the way.
And in the industry that I'm in primarily, it's dentistry.
Yeah,
And we've all talked about for decades that the suicide rates are just too high. We've
yeah,
talked about for decades. There's
yeah,
that trending word right now, burnout.
yeah.
And it doesn't have to happen.
No.
So okay, so if someone wants to get a hold of you, is the best place to go to the website, or is there like on social media, is there a certain platform that you're more visible on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn as Matthew Norton, Instagram and Facebook, but I'm probably more engaged in LinkedIn. But people can email me at drnorton@peoplepluspurpose.com. That's a good way to do it. Yeah.
Thank you so much just for being so present, so generous with who you are and just with sharing with your insights. I really appreciate you, Matthew. I'm 100% in your corner. And just thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, it's my pleasure. The sentiment goes back to you as well. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for inviting this out of me to share. So I think this is a wonderful format, and I love the work that you're doing.
Thank you.